Hello and welcome to IIABCAL Voices. I am your host, James Lott Jr. And I was in the insurance industry for almost 11 years, and I get to work with a bunch of great, amazing people doing diverse things. Now I'm doing the podcast for them, and now we're talking to people in the insurance industry doing amazing, diverse things. And my guest is one of them. Let me read some of his credits so you get to know who he is. Let's see. So right now he is the Senior Vice President of the San Francisco Branch Manager at CNA. I know them. Actually, he works near. I used to work near where he works. It's kind of funny. I know all my stamps. I know 5 of 5. He's also field operations. Prior to that, he was a senior vice president and zone officer for the Western Zone Geography. That's very important. Remember that, folks. We're going to talk about all that for CNA, which included branches in Seattle, Portland, of course, San Francisco, Los Angeles, where I'm at, Orange County, San Diego, and more. He joined CNA about 8 years ago, but he was at AIG, which I know them too, for 18 years. And some of the things he did there, amongst the many things he did there, he was a regional EVP for Japan and Korea. He was a chartist as regional president for 3.5 years, along with AIG's domestic brokerage group as executive vice president and regional president of San Francisco and Great Lake regions. I mean, he just does that all. And just he's worked abroad. We're gonna talk about that on the show. And he also is a board member for Gamma Iota Sigma, which we've talked to some of those people on the show before, and the Insurance Industry Charitable Foundation. It's always good to give back. So please help me welcome Steve Marohn. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing fantastic this morning. Thanks, James, and thanks very much for having me on the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's my honor. I mean, we know these credits. I mean, you're somebody important, so we can talk to you. See what's going on there.
Thank you.
So thanks for being on the show. Well, first of all,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask all my guests, how are you doing these days? It's just in general, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well, managing through certainly these very, very challenging times, and I think that's one of the things that we all have really realized in this process is this is a level setting, right? Every single individual, whether we're in the insurance industry or in other industries, we've all been impacted by this, and we've all had to make adjustments and alignments to sort of how we work and how we live. And so, we're doing that. My wife and I here in the Bay Area, and then we have 3 kids who are actually principally all based down in Southern California. So we're all sort of working our way through and managing through these certainly challenging times. And first and foremost, we're all safe and healthy. So that's certainly primary goal number one. So we're working our way through that, and that's one of the things that I've certainly learned through managing through all of this is just a reinforcement of the element of the resiliency of the insurance industry, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a little bit more about that during the course of our discussion today.
I was going to say, you just read my mind. I was going to say that's one of the things. The insurance industry is still one of those industries that always makes it through. I mean, this, even though this is crazy, we always need insurance. We always have some form, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things, James, that I learned really very early on, not only in my insurance career, but really sort of as a young person growing up, because I am one of those unique individuals that comes from an insurance background. I am second generation insurance.
There you go.
Both of my parents were in the industry, and my dad was actually an independent agent for quite a few years. This was back in the Midwest, but that's where he got his start in the industry. And so, I learned that very early on that during challenging times, during economic ups and downs, in the insurance industry is a very, very constant thing that just has to, you have to work through. So that's one of the things that to me was appealing, and I've certainly learned that through my 30 plus years of working in the industry.
You haven't been in business 30 years. You look too young to be in business 30 years.
30 plus, my friend.
Wow,
30
okay.
plus.
Well, it's been good. It's been good to you, Steve. It's been good to you. I'll give it to you. Good to you. So I was gonna, 2 things I want to bring up. One thing I always say this on the show: insurance industry is about people. So we're learning that this year, especially too. We'll talk about that a little bit. But I want to find out. So for you, because you're a second generation, both parents. I mean, why insurance?
Yeah, So a lot of folks sort of assume that I was going to get into the insurance business, given that that's where both of my parents worked young in their careers, and that's actually where they met. They met at an insurance company by the name of Home Insurance, and for those of us that have been around for a few years, we may recognize that name, although the company's no longer around. But they met in Columbus, Ohio, and at the Home Insurance company there. And so, I certainly saw the opportunities and the very good career and the success that my father had. And, as I was going through university and sort of finishing up on the tail end of school, I didn't know exactly, and I hadn't completely, gone through the path of going into insurance. So, for example, I didn't go through, and at that time, Ohio State did not have the Gamma Iota Sigma chapter was dormant at that time, and then also they didn't have an insurance and risk focus or concentration. So I went and got a business degree, but certainly was able to apply that to the insurance industry. And I was very, very fortunate to be introduced to a number of different great insurance companies after I graduated from university, and ultimately went into a training program with a company, Kemper Insurance.
Oh yeah.
And spent my first 5 years with them after going through an underwriting training program for about the first year and a half.
Yeah, and I know that name also. I know all these names. I've been in this for that's great because you're right. Because I have many people on here who are like, I was not going to go into insurance. It's my parents. My dad was in. I was not going into it. Then he ended up going into it. But I feel like, first of all, not only that it's lucrative, it's constant, but it also seems to work with if you want to have a family, and that family seems to. Do you kind of agree with that? It seems to work with that also.
Yeah, it definitely does. It allows you sort of that, again, diversification of opportunity, right? Because like in my case with my family today, we've, as you were reading through some of the background and experience, I mean, we've moved to a number of different locations. And I've been very fortunate and blessed. My family has been really fantastic with going to a number of different locations, some new locations, from a couple locations in the Midwest. And then back in 2003, we moved here to San Francisco, and we're here for about 6 years before we went overseas. And so, from a family perspective, it certainly has, worked for my career as well as then for our family as we've made these moves. Now, again, that's what sort of worked for me. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that, you have to move around to, continue to grow and develop in your career. That's just the path that happened to work for me and some of the choices that I made along the way. But I think the other thing that we found too, if James, we want to relate this back to what we've sort of been working through and managing through over the past, 8.5 months or so now, is that the flexibility, right? And that this industry, yes, it is absolutely a people business, and we still need to continue to stay focused on and in touch with, our colleagues, as well as in our case, our distribution partners and our customers and our clients and our insureds. But at the same time, we've also sort of learned that we can adapt and be flexible and really help individuals and help families be able to continue to do their job, but give them some flexibility to be able to manage through that. So again, I think that's one of the things. I mean, we quickly adapted. If I think about it from a CNA perspective, we quickly adapted back in mid-March to, the entire organization working remotely, and have been, successful in doing that really again since mid-March.
Yeah. I think a lot of companies, thank God, they were able to work that out. They were able to kind of say, okay, let's set it all up for you guys. Let's do this. And I know some folks are already working virtually anywhere, telecommuting, they call it, I don't know what words they use. But I know now it's kind of, you can do your work from anywhere. If you have proper setup at home or wherever you are, you can actually do your work from anywhere for the most part, right? I mean,
very, very true. Very, very true. And again, some of the things that I've just learned about how, I've adapted through this change too. You're right. I was not one who really did a lot of work from home in the past. And through this process, I've certainly, demonstrated, and I've learned that, you can do that very successfully. You're right, with the right technology and the right setup.
Do you have a good setup at your house?
I do. I do. I will tell you one of the things I invested early on is I had a sit-stand desk in the office there in downtown San Francisco. And so I went out and purchased a sit-stand desk. So as I don't know if you can tell from the video,
I
I
can tell.
pretty much stand most of the day. So I've got that set up, which just for me helps tremendously. So.
Well, I have to ask because I know someone else said, what does it do for you to be able to stand? I mean, it's good for your back, core. I mean, what is it good for?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely, I'm an individual that will tend to pace a lot too. Just as sort of I do my work, so I'll be sort of walking back and forth. I'll get a few steps in during the course of the day as well, and it literally sort of keeps me on my feet.
I like that. I like
And
that.
I got accustomed to that in the office environment, and it worked well enough that I went ahead and adapted it to to my working environment here at home too.
I know folks who like it. I know folks who use it like it. They like that whole this damn thing.
Yeah, definitely so.
That's so funny. Okay, so let's talk about the global perspective because even myself, and I was in the insurance industry, didn't really fully
Hmm.
realize that insurance is global. Other countries have insurance. I mean, I just the lay person, I guess, it's really about insurance. So you worked globally, and you worked in the say the Far East, I guess, region mostly.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me a little bit about how that opportunity came to you first? How did that come to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I oftentimes will tell folks that, I've had the opportunity to move west, and during the course of my career, I was principally moving west. And in this particular case, I moved so far west that I ended up in the Far East,
You
right?
did that
Um,
seriously? You did go that far west? You're like through the Pacific Ocean to the other side of the like that was very west. I like that. I like that.
exactly, exactly. So how did that opportunity came about? It actually, that particular opportunity was the second discussion that I had around an opportunity in Asia and specifically in Japan. But it really sort of all centered from starting with back in the I'd say sort of early 2000s. At the time I was what 5 6 years into my AIG career, but I was also pretty open too with my leadership team and with folks as I was planning out, potential opportunities within my career that, my family and I were open to opportunities really pretty much anywhere. I mean, we
Okay.
were pretty open to all geographies. And so some of the work that I had done in the Midwest, initially it started with a conversation. Um, and again, this would have been back in the early 2000s, to take a look at one particular opportunity in Japan. And that one, we went down the path, but it didn't work out. But that discussion and how that sort of played out is actually what led me to the opportunity in San Francisco to move in 2003. And
Okay.
so I did that role for about 6 years. And then another opportunity came up in Japan at the end of 2009. And through that initial discussion back in the early 2000s and the work done in San Francisco and some other networking that I had done with partners that were over in Japan at the time, then all of that sort of came together to the opportunity then that ultimately to run the commercial operations for Japan and South Korea for AIG at that time.
Wow. Okay? So walk me through. So you land in Japan. I didn't mean to rhyme, but
Yeah.
that's how it works. Land in Japan. So how was that? Was there a culture shock at first? Were you versed in Japanese culture? But now you're there, so you're immersed. I mean, what was it like when you
Yeah.
first got there?
Yeah. So, just to give you some context on that, James, I mean, we had not had any really background or experience in um, whether it was Japan culture specifically or Asian culture. We did not speak the language. And that's one thing, too, I oftentimes say as I'm talking about the experience, that's a sort of a missed opportunity. Had I had that language or had a better understanding of the language going into the role, that certainly would have been, I think, more helpful to manage, like what you were describing in terms of sort of that adjustment, if you will. And keeping in mind too that Japan, going to Japan and moving there and being immersed in a wonderful country and an incredible culture, but it is one of the few places in the world where, you know, English is not spoken very much at all. Now that's changed a lot, and it's changed a lot even just in the time since, you know, the 7.5, almost 8 years now that we've been back, and it changed while we were over there too. But you know, you go there, and yes, all the signs that you see, whether it was in the Narita airport as soon as we landed, or all the road signs on the you know, on the ride in, along the freeway, to just the spoken language. Yeah, it was quite an adjustment. And even if I think about some of the many meetings that I attended while I was there, those were all, or many of those, I should say, were translated. So I'd sit in, you know, hour and a half meetings with an earpiece in, and the entire meeting was being translated, and my input was being translated, obviously, back in the local language. So I mean, we did take Japanese, you know, lessons, language lessons, and I did, my wife did, our youngest son did through school. So we did what we could do to, you know, learn more about the culture, and certainly do our best to put our arms around the language.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes it's good to be immersed there, because you pick up things. I mean, you pick up words anyway. You pick up phrases. You get the gist of like certain things. Like, oh, that's what that means. That's what that means. So in a way,
Yes.
it's good to kind of almost be dropped off, so to speak. And what a
Yeah.
humbling experience! What a humbling experience to have to really sit there and actually pay attention. That's a big lesson for everybody out there. Just period. You know.
It really was. I mean, I think the couple of things that it certainly helped me realize, and hopefully help me become, you know, both a better listener and a better communicator. Completely learned the value of, you know, listening and communication, and when you're not effectively communicating, you know, how the challenges that can create for sure. So.
So how is the insurance system set up there? I mean, what is it similar to here in California, similar in America? I mean, how is it set up there?
Yeah, sort of the best way sort of I describe it or think about it, like in its sort of highest level, if you compare it like to the industry here in the US, the two major differences are sort of on the products and the distribution. So in Japan, a lot of the products are very homogeneous, and there's not a ton of variety in the products, but the distribution model is vast. And where we have several channels of distribution, in Japan, what I got a great education on is just managing through multiple channels, many channels of distribution. Again, we think about it here like in the US, you've got independent agents, you've got brokers in the mix, you've got some other alternative forms of distribution, you know, like in the personal line space, like sort of direct to consumer. Okay. But if you think about it from Japan, or even if you think a little more broadly about Asia, a much more complex form of distribution. So to me, those were sort of you compare and contrast the products, a little bit more straightforward, homogeneous products than compared to the US, where you have a lot of variety in the insurance products. But then in the distribution, where we have a couple of channels here that we principally focus on, over in Asia, the distribution partner is vast. So for example, just in one channel alone that we worked with for our commercial operations, there were like 7,000 agents, and that was just one channel. Wow. One channel of many channels. Wow. that we worked with. So it was really a great learning experience on managing distribution.
That's amazing. Do you think wow. Mm-hmm. How was it for you guys in terms of actually doing business? Is there a different way of doing business over there than over here? I would imagine it would be on some level.
Yeah, definitely. It's much more decentralized. So again, if you think about it, like I was describing sort of the distribution model, you just have so many more distribution touch points, if you will. the relationship side that we were talking about earlier is just as important and just as
Okay.
prevalent in Asia as it is, and specifically in Japan as it is, as we think about it here in the U.S. And you see similarities in that in South Korea as well.
Okay.
When you take a look at the sort of the operation, so there are a lot of similarities from that aspect of the elements of doing business. One of the things too, especially from a commercial insurance perspective, a lot of small business. So the portfolio that I was responsible for at that time probably was about 65% small business, or what's referred to in Asia as SME, small to medium enterprises. Small business makes up a big part of commercial business, and one of the objectives that I had in going over there was not only continuing to build and grow that profitably, but also to build out more of a national and a global presence, a major accounts practice, or what was referred to as MAP, helping to build that out and really build out a global Japanese marketplace.
Wow. When you were there,
Which was
were you working with the U.S. still? And where else were you? Who else were you working with when you were there?
Yeah, so the way it was set up is that in Japan it was the Japanese insurance companies. So those companies stood on their own, as registered and standalone Japanese insurance companies. So that's where we did a lot of our business. But yes, we would at that time too also interact and with our colleagues over in Europe, as well as here in the U.S., because as those Japanese companies were continuing to expand beyond the borders of Japan, it was critically important to have those connections really all around the world. And that's the other thing too, is, as I came to find out after, again, as I mentioned, I've been in the business for a number of years, those relationships, and I would run across and run into and meet with people really all around the world that had, if not, direct connection, we were just one sort of step removed from a relationship that, we both knew the same person. So you really find out that even on a global footprint, it is a small insurance community, as big as the industry is.
Oh no, it's small. Trust me. Even though we've never met each other, even though we're in circles, I'm sure we can probably name 10, 15 people we all know in common. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'm sure. Actually, do know about 5 or 6 for sure we know in common. But that's the thing about this insurance industry. And even my father was in a part of it at one time when I was in it. I remember going to, they're like, "You're James Lott." I'm like, "Yes, he's my father. He's in LA. I'm in San." Like, it's just kind of it's
Yes.
a small world. Small world.
Yes, absolutely. So true, James.
Small, wonderful world. Small, wonderful world. What is one thing that you learned about yourself from that experience?
Great question. One thing that I learned about myself, really that I can really sort of take on any opportunity. I mean, if you think about it, and sort of how that resonated was, as you said, we sort of land in Japan as our family on, I think it was like the 3rd of January of 2010, and you just sort of immediately pop yourself into a city that we obviously had no connection to, right? And you realize that, wow, you were sort of here, and it's my family of 5, my wife and I, with our 3 kids, and we had to sort of figure this out. Now, we weren't completely without lifelines, right? I mean, we had connections to folks at work and things like that, but you realize that, wow, you can really, you can tackle just about anything, and sort of when you put your mind to it and when you really focus on it, that you can do that. And then found out that I am an adventurous person, and do enjoy that, because that's not necessarily, that's one of the things too I talk about with folks and as they evaluate and think about their career. International assignments sound very intriguing and are appealing to a lot of people. But you really do have to do some introspection, really know who you are, sort of what makes you tick, because international assignments are not for everybody. As appealing as they may sound to so many people, they are challenging, and they are very taxing. And I tell folks it was the hardest assignment. Certainly, when I think about it holistically, both from the business side as well as the personal side, it was no doubt one of the most challenging assignments, but also at the same time the most rewarding too, in terms of how we developed as a family, how I developed as an individual, what I've learned in from the insurance industry, and sort of how I see things now differently.
Okay.
I definitely that diversity and that experience really helped me sort of round out and see things in a different light for sure.
I was gonna say that, like, it must inform how you view, well, not only the world, but the world of insurance back here in America, back in the States, and back
Yeah,
here in California, back here in San Francisco. It must really inform that for you, that you like
yeah.
things.
And it's so true, James, and probably one of the greatest lessons, and it's sort of hard to describe unless you've experienced it, is to be an American and live outside of America and sort of observe America. And again, in context,
Mhm.
2010 to 2013, but observe America from the outside looking
What a
in.
trip.
It's a fascinating experience.
Yeah,
It
what a
really, really was.
I mean, did it make you just really when you came back, appreciate America more? And on some level, nothing against, I mean, nothing against Asia, but same for you. You came back, you're like, I like America. I'm glad, I'm here. I'm from here. This is my home. I really like being here.
Yeah, definitely. Not only James to be able to appreciate, you're right, sort of your home and where you're from, and your family and your friends, and the things that that sometimes we do take probably too much for granted. And again, I think lessons that we've learned right through this experience during the pandemic. But the other thing too that it really helped is really sort of opening up and understanding and valuing and appreciating other cultures and understanding the importance of the difference of other cultures. And that was just some incredible life lessons because, again, living in Japan, there are some things that you learn and then you do take for granted when you travel around the world. And I'll give you an example, just sort of the safety of traveling around in Japan and traveling on the trains and I kid you not, you could leave your phone on a train, and two
Nobody.
days later, it would get back to you. It really would. I mean, we left phones in cabs, and the cab driver immediately turned around and brought it back. And our kids, who were at the time when we moved over there, they were young. They were like 9, 11, and 13. After they got acclimated a bit, it was very common for them to hop on the train system and navigate their way around, or hop in a cab and navigate their way around. Tokyo is such a incredibly safe environment. And then you come back or travel to other parts of the world, and you realize, oh, it's not as safe as as
Yes,
maybe what you were
leave your
experiencing in
phone
Japan.
on BART or on Muni and tell me if your phone will still
It's
be
probably
there.
not coming back. You're
Yeah,
right.
good luck to that. Leave your phone in the Uber and see if you get it back. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna tell you that. I'm like, yeah. I used to ride the subway in San Francisco every day to go to work and stuff. So I know, I'm like, I wouldn't leave nothing behind. That would not, nothing would happen there. So yeah, try that. But what an incredible, just an incredible thing for your kids to experience that. And obviously the hero in all this is your wife. She's the hero in all this. I mean,
Oh, absolutely so. Absolutely so. Just fantastic support in, again, not only that move and really helping to ground our family and those experiences, but in all the other moves that we've made too. And that's some great insight into when I talk about the international assignment, that it's appealing to so many, but you really sort of need to know. You really learn a lot about, again, yourself and your family. Yes, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Teresa, who exactly,
Teresa.
exactly, who's been fantastic, and a wonderful wife and a wonderful mom through all these experiences.
And we're gonna end it on that, because we're gonna end it on the hero of this, Teresa. No, but thank you. This is you gave some great takeaways for people. I think the thing about doing an out of the country assignment. I like that. Know yourself first. Know what's going on before you even take the assignment. They are thrilling sounding. They sound, they're amazing. I'm not saying no one should not take them, but really take everything into account. And so listen to what he said, as Steve said, as just kind of a guideline, and then yourself and kind of figure things out. And if you are with somebody, make sure you talk to them. Communication is key. Communication is
Mhm.
key, and figure it out. But people do it all the time, and it's. I think one thing about you, Steve, I think it's really great is that you have experiences that inform everything you do in your life, and it's very your life is diverse. You live in San Francisco, another city that has all diverse people. It's great. So congratulations on that. I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I
So
appreciate it. It's wonderful getting a chance to spend some time with you,
yeah, same
James.
here. Steve Marohn. So tell people, are you on LinkedIn or anything? Tell people where they can find you if they wanted to follow
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. You can certainly connect up with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already.
Yeah, please do. And I think I'm following you. I'll make sure I'm following you. I'm not sure. I'll try to follow you. All right, folks, Steve Marohn. And so you can follow this podcast. It's on every audio streaming service you can think of, from Spotify to iHeartRadio to Google, Apple, wherever you find your podcast. You can go there, look under IABCAL Voices or JLJ Media, one of the two. And you can go ahead and, while you're there, follow, subscribe. If you think anybody needs to hear this podcast, share it, please. You have free permission to share it with anybody you want to. We will not stop you. Also, on my online network, JLJ Media, we're 35 shows. This show will be on there as a playlist for IABCAL Voices. It'll be on the front page. We're watching it now for a few, 3 or 4 days. You can see it there. Again, subscribe, like, comment, share with anybody who needs to hear this and see this, or thinking about doing anything internationally or curious about it. Do that. And of course, you can follow me. We're all James Lott Jr. Sold at James Lott Jr. on all the social media platforms, including TikTok. Yeah, I'm on there. I give advice on stuff on there. That's all I do. I don't do any dances or nothing. But I give advice. I talk about life coaching stuff and organizing tips. So go there and follow me at James Lott Jr. on TikTok. Everyone, please have a safe holiday season. Have compassion. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.